The bikers threatened the old man, certain of their power, unaware that the quiet figure before them possessed a past they couldn't possibly imagine. They saw only a frail 70-year-old man in a worn coat, not a master of a discipline that could end this confrontation in a heartbeat. The leader, a man with a thick beard and colder eyes, had just finished humiliating the young waitress Anya, forcing her to her knees to clean a shattered plate. When the old man, Nikolai, had risen from his booth and spoken to quiet words leave, or be their world, a world built on fear and intimidation, it focused entirely on him. The leader turned, a sneer twisting his lips as he looked Nikolai up and down. "What did you say, old man?" The threat was no longer veiled. It hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as the other bikers began to circle him, their presence a physical wall. But Nikolai did not answer. He simply looked at the man, and in his gaze was not a challenge, but a profound sadness. It was the sadness of a man who had seen this exact scene 1,000 times before and knew it would end in pain, one way or another. He knew the deepest wounds would not be the visible ones. Leader, mistaking silence for fear, shoved him a hard, contemptuous push meant to send him sprawling, but Nikolai did not fall. He barely moved. It was as if the man had pushed against an old oak tree rooted to the earth, and in that instant, with a speed that defied his age, Nikolai moved. It wasn't a punch or a kick. It was a fluid, precise motion, a slight shift of weight, a turn of his wrist, and a gentle pressure on the man's elbow. The biker's arm bent at an angle it was never meant to, and a silent, agonizing shockwave of pain shot through him. He crumpled to his knees, his face a mask of disbelief, his breath stolen from his lungs. There was no cry of pain, just the stunned silence of the room. The other bikers froze, their bravado evaporating, replaced by a primal fear of something they could not understand. They saw not a fighter, but something far more terrifying, a man who could inflict absolute damage with absolute calm. They scrambled to help their leader, hauling him to his feet, and stumbled out of the diner without another word. Leaving the broken plate and their shattered pride behind them, the silence that followed was different. It was heavy with fear and confusion. The owner of the diner, a man who had known Nikolai for years as the quiet man who only ever ordered tea, came over, his face pale. He asked Nikolai to leave. He was sorry, he said, but he couldn't have that kind of trouble in his place. Nikolai understood. He had not been a hero. He had been a disruption, a glimpse into a world of violence they wanted no part of. Anya, the waitress, stood by the counter, her tears now dry. She looked at him not with gratitude, but with the same fear as everyone else. He had saved her from humiliation, but he had replaced it with an even greater terror. He was alone again, shrouded in the very strength that was meant to protect. He walked out into the cold afternoon, the weight of his past settling back onto his shoulders like a familiar coat. The small apartment was a sanctuary of solitude. The only decoration a faded photograph of a smiling woman on his bedside table. Alina, his wife. His skills, his discipline, his black belt, none of it could save her from the sickness that took her, the one opponent he could never face. His strength had always felt like a curse, a power that could break bones but could never mend a broken heart. The next morning he found a small loaf of freshly baked bread outside his door. There was no note, but he knew it was from Anya. It was a small, fragile bridge across the chasm of fear, a silent acknowledgement that his act had been born, not of violence, but of kindness. He started visiting the local community center, a small, worn-down building where the forgotten people of the town gathered for warmth and a game of chess. It was there he met Leo, a small, quiet boy with eyes that held the same haunted look as the waitress. Anya, the boy, was a target for the local bullies, and he moved through the world as if apologizing for taking up space. He would watch Nikolai play chess, mesmerized by the quiet confidence with which the old man moved the pieces. He saw something in Nikolai's stillness, a strength that wasn't loud or aggressive, but deep and unshakable. One afternoon, Leo approached him, his voice barely a whisper, and asked Nikolai to teach him how to fight. Nikolai's heart seized. He refused, gently but firmly. He explained that fighting only created more pain, that the true battle was not with others, but with the fear inside. It was flooded with memories of his own son, a boy he had trained, who had taken the lessons of strength and twisted them into aggression, creating a rift between them that had never healed. The fear of repeating that failure was a ghost that haunted him. But Leo was different. He didn't want to hurt anyone, he said. He just wanted to stop being afraid. He wanted to learn how to stand tall, how to feel safe in his own skin. His plea was not for power but for peace. It was a language Nikolai understood. He agreed not to teach him combat, but to teach him something far more important: discipline, awareness, and the quiet courage to be himself. The lessons took place in the early morning light of the park, far from prying eyes. Nikolai taught Leo not how to throw a punch, but how to breathe, how to stand, how to meet someone's gaze without flinching. He taught him that the greatest defense was not a block or a strike, but the quiet confidence that made you an unworthy target. Slowly, a change began to take place in the boy. He walked taller. He spoke with a clearer voice. He even started to smile, and as Leo healed, so did Nikolai. The boy's simple trust was a balm on his old wounds. He was beginning to believe that his strength could be a gift, not a curse. He reconnected with Anya, the waitress, their friendship a quiet harbor in a lonely world. For the first time in years, Nikolai felt a flicker of hope. But hope is a fragile thing. One afternoon, the bullies cornered Leo by the schoolyard. This time, however, Leo did not cower. He stood his ground, his voice steady as he told them to leave him alone, just as Nikolai had taught him. But among the bullies was the older brother of one of them, a young man who had been one of the bikers in the diner that day. Recognizing Leo as the old man's student, his wounded pride ignited into a blind rage. The attack was swift and brutal. Leo never had a chance. Nikolai was sitting in his apartment when he got the call. Leo was in the hospital. He rushed there to find the boy in a bed, his face swollen and bruised, a cast on his arm. Leo's mother was there, her eyes wild with grief and anger. She turned on Nikolai, her voice raw with accusation. "We did this," she screamed. "You taught him to be brave, and this is what it got him. You brought this trouble on us." It's her words were stones, and they shattered the fragile peace Nikolai had built. The community, which had slowly begun to accept him, now looked at him with renewed suspicion and fear. Once again the outsider, the harbinger of violence. He looked at the small broken boy in the hospital bed, and his own heart fractured. All his life he had tried to protect the innocent, and all he had ever done was bring them pain. The weight of his failure was unbearable. He went home, packed a small bag, and decided to disappear. It was the only way to keep from hurting anyone else. He was sitting in the dark, his bag by the door, when a soft knock came. It was Anya. She had brought him a container of warm soup. She saw the bag, the despair in his eyes, and she understood. She did not try to stop him with arguments or platitudes. She simply sat with him in the quiet darkness and told him what Leo had said to her from his hospital bed. He had told her that when the biker attacked, he wasn't scared. For the first time in his life, he felt brave. He knew he had done the right thing, and no one could take that away from him. "That was your gift to him," Anya said softly. "You didn't teach him how to fight, you taught him how to be unbreakable." Her words were a single, steady flame in the the crushing darkness of his guilt. He realized she was right. His purpose was not to prevent pain that was impossible. No, his purpose was to build the strength to endure it. He unpacked his bag. He would not run. The next day he went back to the hospital, and the day after that, sat by Leo's bed, sometimes reading to him, sometimes just sitting in silence. His presence was a quiet, unyielding promise. He was no longer fighting his past. He was taking responsibility for the present. Word travels fast in a small town. The biker leader, Victor, heard what his member had done to a child. While his own pride had been stung by the old man in the diner, there was a line, a code that had been crossed. An attack on a child was an act of cowardice, not strength. And driven by a twisted sense of honor, he went to the hospital. He expected to find a grieving family, perhaps to offer a grudging payment to make the problem go away. Instead, he found Nikolai sitting peacefully beside Leo's bed, reading from a book of old stories. Victor stopped in the doorway, the confrontation he had prepared for dying on his lips. He looked at the old man, and for the first time he saw him clearly. He saw not an enemy, but a guardian, a protector. Nikolai looked up, his eyes meeting Victor's. There was no anger in his gaze, no threat, only a deep, profound weariness. "True strength," Nikolai said, his voice barely a whisper. is not measured by the pain you can cause, but by the suffering you can prevent. It is about protecting the small, the weak, the innocent. In that quiet hospital room, Victor was not defeated by a physical blow, but by the immense moral weight of the old man's words. He felt the hollowness of his own life, the cheapness of his power. He turned without a word and left. The next day, Leo's substantial hospital bills were paid in full by an anonymous donor. The biker who had attacked him was never seen in the town again. Leo recovered, his physical wounds healing, his spirit stronger than ever. His friendship with Nikolai deepened, evolving from student and teacher to something much closer to a boy and his grandfather. They spent their afternoons in the park, not practicing blocks and strikes, but playing chess, the board a silent testament to a different kind of strategy, a different kind of strength. The town, too, began to see Nikolai differently. They no longer saw a threat, but a quiet pillar of their community. The diner owner welcomed him with a warm smile. Anya became the daughter he never had, their bond a quiet, beautiful melody of shared loneliness and discovered family. In the golden light of a setting sun, Nikolai watched Leo ponder his next move on the chessboard, a small, genuine smile on his face. He had finally won the only fight that ever mattered. He had made peace with the strength inside him, transforming it from a weapon of war into a tool of healing. He was no longer a man with a hidden black belt, but a man whose heart was finally and completely at peace.